All right, I know this has been quite a topic of discussion. So while citing economic concerns, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced last night the easing of some lockdown restrictions from May the 1st. That's next week, Friday. So while the borders will remain closed, people will remain at home. Some businesses will be allowed to reopen. The ban on cigarette sales has been lifted from May the 1st, but there's no such luck for those calling for the lifting of a ban on alcohol sales. Sinenhlanhla Mnguni is the chairperson of the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, the chairperson, and he joins me now via Skype. A very good evening to you, Sinenhlanhla. Thanks indeed for your time.
Good evening, Griselda. Thank you for having me on your show.
All right, so I guess this particular decision by the president last night, you probably welcome that.
Of course. We welcome the decision by the president in as far as lifting the ban on the sale of cigarettes. It is in line with what we have, the argument that we have advanced over the course of the last 5 weeks of the lockdown period, in that we felt that, look, we had requested rather that the president lift the ban on the sale of cigarettes.
All right, we seem to be frozen on that particular Skype to Sinenhlanhla Mnguni. We'll join him again very shortly. Of course, a lot of commentary pertaining to that on, of course, the lifting on the ban on cigarettes from the 1st of May. Sinenhlanhla, I hope you can hear me again. Please continue. You were saying you welcome the president's decision. You were still speaking.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me, Griselda?
Loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Yes, we welcome the decision by the president. As we had previously stated, this is in line with what we had requested from government when we attempted to engage them. Obviously, those attempts at the time fell on deaf ears, but we did not stop in our quest. We had obviously, which has been much publicized, initiated legal proceedings in this regard to get government to consider our request to lift the ban on the sale of cigarettes. There was some correspondence between our legal team and the state attorney acting on behalf of the presidency. And I think ultimately, without the need for litigation, the government made the correct call in lifting the ban on the sale of cigarettes.
I'll come to the legal avenue that you had been exploring. But first of all, before we get there, Sinenhlanhla, I mean, the ban on the sale of tobacco products was implemented on March the 27th. Talk to us a bit about your estimates regarding the loss to the industry during the prohibited period.
The loss to the industry is definitely significant, substantial rather. For instance, if you look at what the South African Revenue Service has been collecting from the tobacco industry over the last few years, if you look at the year 2018-2019, for instance, SARS collected just under 13 billion. They collected just under 14 billion the previous financial year. So we're estimating that SARS alone would have been collecting about between 1.2 to 1.5 billion rand on excise levied on cigarettes. Then you obviously look along the value chain where you have farmers, cigarette manufacturers, distributors and wholesalers and retailers of these goods. And you can only imagine the damage to the economic aspect of all these components of the tobacco industry value chain.
But I can also understand, your concern about the economic impact regarding that. But you've also been heavily criticized for mounting that legal challenge against the prohibition. Others accusing you of choosing profit over the protection of the lives of people.
That is correct. That was never the case, though. Our challenging of the ban on the sale of cigarettes was based on the fact that we felt that government's interpretation of the regulations of the disaster management pertaining to, particularly in relation to the lockdown period, were arbitrary in that, for instance, we saw other products which you would say were also detrimental to one's health, such as fizzy drinks and other confectionery products being sold. And we felt that the Act itself was silent on the issue of the sale of cigarettes, which is distinguishable from alcohol, for instance, which was excluded explicitly by the Act. So that was the angle that we went on.
But what was that going to help, Sinenhlanhla? I see you make a reference to fizzy drinks. Let's put that aside for a second. I mean, if we're talking about alcohol and cigarettes, that would certainly make a bit of sense, in particular if you look at what some of the experts in this particular field say. Cigarettes have a particular effect on, if we're looking at dealing with the issue of the coronavirus and alcohol. Yes, it was not quite clearly stipulated in those regulations, but did you simply just look away from what health experts had been saying about the dangers of having cigarettes still being sold in a time such as an outbreak of the coronavirus?
Not at all, Griselda. We've actually never disputed the negative effects of smoking cigarettes. We had merely made submissions to government in as far as what we felt were also negative effects on the health, for instance, of smokers. That was one angle that we also advanced to government. But further, that South Africans, there's a smoking population of 11 million, and ultimately smoking is not outlawed in the country. And we felt that, look, smokers perhaps had a constitutional right to elect to smoke. You would also note that South Africa is the only country in the world that had banned the sale of cigarettes. And further, with studies that we have seen, there hasn't actually been a link between smoking and the spread of the COVID-19 virus. For instance, I was recently pointed to a study which was conducted in another country where it showed that only 4% of those smokers had contracted the COVID-19 virus.
But Sinenhlanhla, just very quickly, I'm sure you would agree with me, while you're saying that South Africa was the only country to have imposed a ban on the sale of cigarettes, certainly South Africa could not impose the kinds of restrictions that it did. Each country around the world is doing that based on the risk assessment in those particular countries. So South Africa certainly saw that this was one of the issues that was going to be a problem. And you agree with the health experts that the sale of cigarettes would have been, I guess, detrimental to the continued fight against the further spread of the coronavirus. So having to have South Africa saying that South Africa is the only country to have done so, I think falls through the cracks.
No, I hear you loud and clearly there, Griselda. We had, if you during the last 4 weeks, had attempted to engage with government on this particular issue. Our concern is that we were never advanced reasons as to why. Although you may argue that it's a logical, it's one that one should arrive at logically, we were never advanced reasons, and we had attempted to engage government on that particular issue. Obviously, our organization has always said that if government had satisfied us that and advanced us the reasons that they had implemented this ban, we would have applied our minds and probably conceded and not proceeded with any further steps.
Sinenhlanhla, just finally before we go, I mean, rather than have that money spent on food, you're basically arguing for government to give you reasons on why it was imposing. You don't disagree with its happening or South Africa implementing it. You just wanted to be given reasons. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that we weren't engaged by government. We had attempted to, engage with government on this issue. It wasn't an issue of us wanting to be adversarial on this particular topic, but we felt that as a contributor to the economy, perhaps government could have engaged us and said, listen, your industry is going to be affected by this lockdown period. There was a lot of uncertainty going into it, and a lot of people along the value chain in the tobacco industry felt that, look, there needed to be some sort of clarity, particularly because what we saw in the aftermath is that the illicit trade in cigarettes actually flourished, and people were still purchasing cigarettes. So the step by government in banning the sale of cigarettes actually didn't prevent people from smoking.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Sinenhlanhla Mnguni, Chairperson of the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association. Of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa last night said that as of the 1st of May, that ban on the sale of cigarettes has been lifted.